I was halfway through sorting old photo albums when the phone rang. The kind of ring that slices through silence, making you flinch even when you're expecting it. My eyes darted toward the screen, and for a moment, my heart stopped cold. Daniel. I stared at the name on the caller ID, blinking, frozen in place. The phone rang again. It had to be some kind of mistake. My hand shook as I reached for it, instinctively swiping to answer, before my brain could catch up to what was happening. Hello? My voice came out quieter than I intended, a shaky whisper. For a few seconds, there was nothing but static. And then, unmistakably, I heard it, his voice. Hey, Maria. What's going on? Casual, like it was any other day. I felt the air leave my lungs. My head spun as the room suddenly seemed too small, too tight. I could barely get out the words. Daniel? Yeah, it's me. He sounded so normal, so alive. There was a faint chuckle in his tone, as if I'd said something silly. You sound like you've seen a ghost. I almost laughed, but the fear gripped my throat too tightly. A ghost. Daniel had been dead for 5 years. I remember that day like a fresh scar. The phone call from the hospital, the endless questions, the disbelief. But this voice, his voice, was too real. How? I tried to ask, but the words felt stuck. My mind raced with explanations, each more illogical than the last. Was it some kind of recording? A cruel prank? My hand gripped the phone tighter, like I could physically hold onto the sound of him. Maria, you okay? He asked again, softer this time, like he could sense the panic swirling inside me. No, I choked out, finally finding my voice. Daniel, how is this happening? You're dead. There was a pause, the kind where the air between us thickened with confusion. I could hear him breathing on the other end, just as I'd heard him breathe so many nights beside me. My heart raced so fast it hurt. What are you talking about? His tone had shifted, calm but with an edge of concern. I'm right here. I'm fine. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Nothing about this made sense, but the sound of his voice was too vivid to deny. It wasn't some impersonal recording. This was Daniel, my Daniel. He was talking to me like he'd never left, like the last 5 years had been nothing but a bad dream. I swallowed, trying to ground myself. Daniel, you died in that car accident. 5 years ago. I was at your funeral. I scattered your ashes in the lake, where you said you wanted to be. For a moment, the line went quiet. My pulse hammered in my ears as I waited for a response, feeling like the ground was slipping out from under me. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer, almost apologetic. Maria, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here. I'm fine. Are you sure you're okay? Maybe you've just been stressed. I felt dizzy. Was I losing my mind? This couldn't be happening. Maybe it was stress, or maybe grief was finally doing what everyone had warned me it would, driving me insane. But I wasn't hallucinating. I couldn't be. The sound of him was too clear, too tangible. I started, but I had no idea what to say next. How do you argue with the voice of your dead husband on the phone? Listen, I'll come home, okay? He continued, as though this conversation hadn't just unraveled the fabric of my reality. We'll talk. I'll explain everything when I see you. No, I blurted, panic rising again. I wasn't ready for that. What if someone showed up at my door pretending to be him? Or worse, what if no one showed up at all, and I realized this was just in my head? Daniel paused, then laughed softly, the way he used to when he thought I was overreacting. All right. No need to panic, Maria. Just breathe. Okay? I'll call you again later. Get some rest. And then the line went dead. I sat there for what felt like hours, the phone still pressed to my ear. My heart pounded, thoughts spinning out of control. I stared blankly at the photos scattered across the floor, remnants of the life we had built together, now shattered by a single phone call. I should have been angry, angry that someone was playing a cruel joke, angry that my brain was betraying me like this. But all I felt was this cold, sickening sense of uncertainty. Had I imagined it all? Could grief really make someone hear things that weren't there? I pulled up the call log, scrolling to the most recent incoming number. And there it was. Daniel. The name stared back at me, mocking me. His name, his number. The same number I had deleted from my contacts 5 years ago, unable to bear seeing it anymore. But now, here it was again. Real. Impossible. I clutched my phone tightly, a pit forming in my stomach. I could feel the edges of reality starting to blur, like everything I thought I knew was slipping away. My hands were trembling again as I typed out a message to my best friend, Jenna. Jenna, I need to talk. Something weird just happened. Call me. I sat in silence, waiting for her reply, knowing I wouldn't be able to make sense of this alone. And as the minutes ticked by, one thought played over and over in my mind. How could Daniel be calling me? What do you think is going on? Leave a comment below. Would you answer a call from someone you've lost? Jenna called almost immediately, her voice familiar and grounding. Maria, what's going on? You sounded freaked out in your text. I hesitated, trying to find the right words, but they felt ridiculous, even in my own head. Jenna, I know this sounds crazy, but I just got a call from Daniel. There was a pause on the other end, then a soft sigh. Maria, she said carefully, I know today's tough. I remember. This is around the time he passed, right? Your mind might be playing tricks on you. Grief does that. She sounded like she was trying to soothe me, as if I were a child frightened by a bad dream. But this was no dream. The memory of his voice, so familiar, still clung to me, making it hard to breathe. I'm not imagining it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I saw his name on my phone. I heard him, Jenna. He sounded so real, like he was alive, like nothing had ever happened. Jenna was quiet again, this time longer. Okay, she finally said. Okay, let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe someone cloned his number. It could be some kind of scam. People do all sorts of weird stuff with technology these days. I clung to her rationality, but a gnawing doubt remained. But he knew things, personal things. He sounded exactly like him, Jen. There's no way a stranger could fake that. Her silence stretched again, and I could feel her unease seeping through the phone. Maria, she said gently, you know that's impossible. Daniel's gone. You were there, at the hospital. You saw him. This can't be him. She wasn't saying anything I didn't already know, but it didn't help. If it wasn't Daniel, then who was it? My mind jumped to every horror story I'd ever heard, about people impersonating the dead, about technology being used to manipulate grief. But this felt different. It felt personal. Maybe you're right, I said, my voice thin. But what if there's more to this? More to this how? Jenna's tone sharpened. Maria, you need to stop. You've been doing so well, moving forward. Don't let this pull you back. Her words stung, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just grief rearing its ugly head again. There was something deeply unsettling about the call, and it left a question burning in my mind. What if he's not really gone? That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind seemed magnified. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over again in my mind. His voice, his words, they haunted me, unraveling the fragile sense of reality I'd rebuilt after his death. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I visited his grave. The cemetery was quiet, the air cool and still as I stood before the small stone marker etched with his name. My stomach churned as I stared at it, trying to reconcile the finality of his death with the sound of his voice still echoing in my mind. Daniel, I whispered, kneeling down to brush away the leaves scattered around his grave. I don't understand what's happening. Are you really gone? Or is this some kind of mistake. But the grave, of course, remained silent. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart leaped into my throat. I fumbled to pull it out, hands shaking, half expecting to see Daniel's name again. But it wasn't him. It was my therapist, Dr. Reynolds. I had called her the night before, desperate for some kind of explanation. "Maria, I got your message," Dr. Reynolds said when I answered. "It sounds like you're going through a rough time. You mentioned you got a call from Daniel?" "Yes," I breathed. "It was him, doctor. I know it sounds crazy, but it was his voice. He knew things only he could know." Her response was calm, measured, exactly what I needed to hear. Sometimes, when we're grieving, our minds find ways to make us believe the impossible. It's not unusual for people to hear or see their loved ones, even years after they've passed. It's part of processing unresolved feelings. I closed my eyes, trying to stay composed. But it wasn't just hearing him. It felt so real. He talked to me like it was any other day. It wasn't a memory or a dream. "Grief can be powerful," she continued. "It can distort reality, especially around anniversaries or other significant dates. But we have to ground ourselves in what we know to be true. Daniel passed away, Maria. You were there." I wanted to believe her, but the call had shattered any sense of certainty I had left. "Do you think I'm losing it?" "No," she said gently. "I think you're grieving. Grief doesn't follow a straight line. It's complicated, and sometimes it makes us question our reality. But I don't think you're losing your mind. I do think you need to focus on what's real and not let your grief pull you back into the past." I thanked her, but her words, though well-meaning, felt hollow. The call was real. I could still hear his voice. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table, I noticed something strange. The house phone's display was flashing. I hadn't even realized it was connected. No one ever called the landline anymore. My heart lurched when I saw it. A missed call from an unknown number. Without thinking, I hit the playback button for the voicemail. There was a brief moment of static, and then his voice. Again. "Daniel. Hey, Maria. It's me. I know you're confused, but we'll talk soon. Okay? I'm coming home. We'll figure this out." The message ended abruptly, the line cutting out with a soft click, leaving me in stunned silence. I dropped the phone, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Coming home? How could he say that? How could he even exist? I grabbed my cell phone and immediately called the number back, my hands trembling as I dialed. But the call didn't go through. Just a mechanical voice saying, "This number is no longer in service." Panic surged through me. I paced the room, trying to make sense of it all. I didn't know where to turn, who to trust. Was this some sort of sick joke? A scam, as Jenna had said? Or was something more sinister at play? Suddenly, an idea struck me. I could trace the calls. I grabbed my laptop and started searching for a private investigator, someone who could help me get to the bottom of this. There had to be an explanation, something logical. I refused to believe I was losing my grip on reality. As I hit send on my inquiry to a local investigator, I stared at the phone again, daring it to ring. Part of me hoped it would, and the other part was terrified of what might happen if it did. Because if Daniel wasn't dead, then where had he been all this time? "Do you think Maria should investigate further, or let it go? What would you do if you received a call like this?" The next few days passed in a blur, a haze of nervous energy and sleepless nights. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anticipation, fear, hope, confusion, all twisting together into something that left me raw. The private investigator, Mark Henderson, finally responded to my inquiry. His message was simple, professional, but direct. "We'll trace the calls. Let's meet and go over the details." 2 days later, I sat across from him at a coffee shop, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. Mark was in his mid-40s, with a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that I found reassuring. As I told him about the calls, I could see the skepticism in his eyes, but he didn't interrupt. "And you're sure it's his voice?" he asked when I finished. I nodded. "I don't just mean it sounds like him. I mean it is him. The way he talks, the little things he says, it's all too real." Mark leaned back, scribbling notes. Could it be someone imitating him? Maybe someone with access to old recordings, things he said or shared with you. I swallowed hard, the thought making my stomach turn. "I don't know. That's why I need to find out who's behind this." He nodded, pulling out a small device from his bag. "I'll set up a trace on the numbers calling you. If it's a scam, we'll know soon enough. But I have to ask, are you prepared for whatever we might find? This could be someone messing with your head." I looked away, staring out the window, watching the world go on like nothing had changed. "I just need answers, Mark. I don't care what the truth is, as long as it's real." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone beside me, waiting. A part of me wanted the calls to stop, to never hear his voice again, so I could let go and move on. But another part, perhaps the deeper, more desperate part, longed to hear him one more time, to know for sure. Around midnight, the phone buzzed. My heart jumped into my throat as I reached for it. It was him, Maria. His voice was steady, soft, as though he had just woken up. "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I know this must be confusing." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This wasn't just confusion. It was torment. "Daniel, what's going on? How are you calling me? Where have you been?" There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought the call had dropped. But then he sighed, his voice thick with regret. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't want to leave you." "You did leave me," I said, my voice rising with the flood of emotions I'd been holding back. "You died, Daniel. I've spent 5 years trying to put my life back together without you. How can you be here now, talking to me like nothing happened?" "I know." His voice cracked, and for a brief second, it felt real, like the man I'd loved was right there, on the other end, just beyond my reach. "I didn't want it to end like that. I didn't want to hurt you. But there are things I can't explain, Maria. Not yet." "Then when?" I demanded, frustration spilling over. "I need to know. You owe me that much." Another pause, and then, quietly, "Soon. I'll come to you, and I'll explain everything." Before I could say another word, the line went dead again. The next morning, Mark called me. "We traced the number," he said, his tone guarded. "It's coming from a small property out in the countryside, a place you might be familiar with." My pulse quickened. "Where?" "It's the cabin you and Daniel used to go to, the one by the lake." The air left my lungs in a rush. The cabin, the place where we'd spent our honeymoon, where we used to escape from everything. It had been abandoned for years, at least, that's what I thought. I hadn't been back since he died. "Who's living there now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark hesitated. "No one, as far as we can tell. The place has been empty. No recent sales, no signs of anyone moving in. But that's where the calls are coming from." A chill ran down my spine. The cabin had always been a sanctuary for us, but now it felt like the epicenter of something far darker. "I need to go there." "I don't know if that's a good idea," Mark warned. "If someone's playing games with you, it could be dangerous." "I don't care," I said, my mind already made up. "I need to know what's happening. I can't keep living like this." 2 days later, I was driving down the long, winding road that led to the cabin, my heart pounding with every mile. The trees loomed over the road, casting long shadows in the fading light of late afternoon. Memories of the time Daniel and I had spent there came flooding back. Lazy mornings by the fire, long walks by the lake, the quiet peace we'd always found in that secluded place. But now, it felt ominous. When I arrived, the cabin stood just as I remembered it, nestled among the trees, with the lake glittering behind it. But the stillness of the place unnerved me. It was too quiet, too empty. I stepped out of the car, my feet crunching on the gravel as I approached the front door. My hand shook as I reached for the knob, half expecting it to be locked, but it turned easily. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, the familiar scent of wood and earth greeting me. The cabin looked exactly the same as we'd left it. Dust-covered furniture, old photos still hanging on the walls. But there was something different now, an undercurrent of dread that made the air feel thick, suffocating. I moved through the room slowly, my heart racing, scanning for anything that might explain what was happening. But everything was just as it should have been, untouched by time or mystery, until I found the letter. It was tucked into a drawer in the bedroom we used to share, an envelope yellowed with age, but addressed to me in Daniel's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Maria, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I don't know how much time has passed, or how much you know by now, but there are things I couldn't tell you. Things I had to protect you from. Before the accident, I was involved in something dangerous. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. I never meant to keep secrets from you, but I had to keep you safe. If you're receiving calls from me, it means something has gone wrong. Something I can't control. But please, don't trust everything you hear. There's more to this than you think. I love you, Maria, and I'm sorry. The letter slipped from my hands, fluttering to the floor. My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. What could Daniel have been involved in? And how was he still reaching out to me, 5 years after his death? Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it, my hands shaking. Daniel. I answered, my heart pounding in my chest. Maria, he said, his voice low, urgent. You need to leave the cabin. Now. What do you think Daniel was involved in? Why is Maria in danger? Let us know what you think is going to happen next. Maria, you need to leave the cabin. Now. Daniel's voice sent a chill down my spine, more urgent than ever before. My heart pounded as I clutched the phone, my fingers gripping it so tightly they ached. The air in the cabin felt suddenly heavy, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. Daniel, I whispered, glancing around the dimly lit room. What's going on? What are you not telling me? His voice softened, but the urgency remained. There's no time to explain everything. Just trust me, please. You're in danger. You have to get out of there before. The line crackled and then went dead. I stared at the phone, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Danger? From what? I had already found the letter, the one that hinted at a secret life Daniel had kept from me. Was this all connected? Or was it just my mind unraveling, caught in some cruel trick of grief and desperation? I fumbled for my keys, my mind racing, trying to process everything. If I was in danger, what kind of danger? And why would Daniel be reaching out after all these years to warn me now? None of it made sense. Suddenly, a sound, barely perceptible, creaked from the hallway behind me. My blood turned cold. The cabin had been empty when I arrived, but now, I wasn't so sure. I turned slowly, my eyes straining in the dim light. There was nothing but the long shadow of the doorway, but I could feel it. Someone, or something, was watching me. Hello? My voice was barely above a whisper, my heart hammering in my chest. No answer. I stepped back toward the door, my body trembling with fear. I couldn't explain it, but the sense of danger Daniel had warned me about was suddenly very real. I had to get out. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the reflection of the window. A figure, a dark silhouette, standing just beyond the trees, watching the cabin. My breath hitched in my throat. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet were frozen in place. Who was out there? I forced myself to move, stumbling toward the front door, throwing it open, and rushing outside. The cool evening air hit me like a slap, but I barely noticed. My eyes darted around the clearing, searching for any sign of the figure I'd seen. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, but whoever, or whatever, had been watching was gone. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking as I unlocked the car and scrambled inside. The engine roared to life, and I sped down the winding dirt road, my heart racing as fast as the car. I didn't stop until I was miles away, the cabin a distant memory in the rearview mirror. I made it back to my apartment, but the tension didn't leave me. My hands still trembled as I locked the door behind me, leaning against it, trying to catch my breath. I had to understand what was happening, why Daniel had warned me, what kind of danger I had narrowly escaped. The letter. I needed to read the letter again. I pulled it from my pocket, my eyes scanning Daniel's familiar handwriting. The words echoed in my mind, filling the silence around me. Something dangerous. I never meant to keep secrets from you. Don't trust everything you hear. What had Daniel gotten himself into before the accident? What was so dangerous that he had felt the need to shield me from it, even after death? The unanswered questions swirled in my mind, but there was something else now, an undeniable, gnawing fear. Someone had been at that cabin, and whoever they were, they knew I was there. My phone buzzed again. My stomach lurched as I saw Daniel's name on the screen. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button. Did I really want to hear his voice again? Did I want to know more? I answered, Maria. His voice was quieter this time, like he was fading. Daniel, please, I whispered. Tell me the truth. What's happening? Who was at the cabin? He sighed, and for a moment, I could hear the weight of all the years between us in that single breath. I tried to protect you, Maria, but I've put you in danger. I thought I could keep this from you, that I could handle it. But I was wrong. What did you do? I asked, my voice cracking. What were you involved in? It's not just me, he said, his voice growing fainter. There are people who wanted something from me. Something I knew, information. I tried to walk away, but they didn't let me. And now, they know about you. I felt a cold wave of fear wash over me. What do you mean? Who are they? I can't explain everything right now. Just know that I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted you to be a part of it. But they've been watching you, Maria. They've been waiting. My heart raced. Waiting for what? His voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. For me to contact you. For you to lead them to what they're looking for. I swallowed, dread pooling in my stomach. What are they looking for? There was a long pause. I could hear the strain in his voice now, as if the connection between us was slipping away. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you leave it all behind. Don't try to find out more. Don't go back to the cabin. Don't answer their calls. My grip on the phone tightened. But Daniel. No, he interrupted, his voice firmer now. You have to let me go, Maria. This is the last time I can protect you. After this, I won't be able to reach you again. The weight of his words hit me like a blow. This was it. Whatever had been connecting us, keeping him tethered to me all these years, was about to vanish. And with it, the last remnants of the life we had shared. Daniel, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I don't want to lose you again. You already lost me, he said, his voice softening with a sadness that broke my heart. And now, you have to move on. It's the only way you'll be safe. I wiped at my tears, my chest tight with the weight of goodbye. I love you. I love you too, he whispered. More than you know. But this is goodbye, Maria. For real this time. And just like that, the line went dead. I sat there in the silence, my phone still pressed to my ear, my heart aching in ways I hadn't felt in years. This time, I knew he was really gone. The weight of that finality crushed me, but beneath it was something else, something that felt like a release, an ending. I stood, walking to the window, staring out at the city lights. For the first time in 5 years, the grief felt lighter, less suffocating. I would never know all the secrets Daniel had kept, or the full extent of what had led to those phone calls. But I knew this much. It was time to let him go. As I stared into the distance, a soft breeze brushed past me, and for the briefest moment, I could almost hear his voice, faint and far away. "Goodbye, Maria." And this time, I didn't answer. Would you be able to let go of someone you loved if they tried to contact you after death? Share your thoughts and experiences below.